Okay, I'd like to call to order a regular meeting of the Watchung Borough Board of Education on September 23rd, 2021 at 7 p.m. May we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, just give me 1 second to adjust my screen. Okay. Welcome to a meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Watchung. Please be advised that this and all meetings of the board are open to the public and media consistent with the Open Public Meetings Act, and that the advance notice required therein has been provided. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Watchung at which formal action may be taken. This meeting is being conducted in person with an option to attend remotely using communication technology. Instructions for joining the meeting and participating in public comments have been posted on the district website and sent to Watchung Borough and the Watchung Public Library, as well as to the school community through an email blast. The public will have an opportunity to be heard as shown on the agenda at points in the meeting provided for the public to address the board. Members of the public also have been given the option to submit public comments to the board secretary via email or written letter no later than 24 hours in advance of the meeting. Individuals submitting comments via email or written letter must state their names and addresses. Recording or photographing other than for private personal use requires the consent of parents/guardians whose children may be included in the image. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Barbella?
Here.
Mr. Beccarelli?
Here.
Mrs. Harvey?
Here.
Mrs. Ingracia?
Here.
Mr. Kraft? Mr. McDonald?
Here.
Mrs. Murad?
Here.
Mrs. Scharf?
Here.
Okay, so we have 7. Mr. Kraft, you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, 8 present.
Okay, we're going to move into board member comments. Are there any comments from board members?
I'd like to just make a quick comment. One of the major things on the agenda tonight is a resolution to approve a referendum. The way I'd like to do it is just, read the usual resolutions, and then I would go into detail during the discussion part and try to explain the referendum as best I can to the board and the public, and then take any questions from the board or comments after that, if that's okay with everybody.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'd also just like to make a comment on behalf of the entire board. We would like to extend our most heartfelt condolences to Jessica Ingracia and her family for the loss of her father-in-law, Anthony Ingracia. And in her family's time of grieving, we wish to let you know that our sincerest sympathy is always with you.
He was a great member of the Watchung community, and it's sad to see him gone.
Thank you.
Are there any other board comments? Okay, we're going to move to the superintendent's remarks.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. First, I want to thank everyone for the cooperation with the opening of school. We had quite an unusual start, having to use 2 emergency closing days during the first week of school. We've recovered from that and moved on thanks to school community. that is resilient, flexible, and positive. And I'm grateful for everyone's commitment to our health and safety protocols as we move through this phase of the pandemic. Things have gone smoothly in school, and I have to say it's just plain wonderful to have the students back in school every day. We thankfully incurred only minor storm damage in the form of water intrusion in the band room and to a lesser extent in a storage room at Valley View. The carpet in the band room had to be removed by the buildings and ground staff, who did a great job with that the day after the flood. At Bayberry, despite a detention basin that was close to overflowing, the school escaped any damage, and we're very pleased with that and very fortunate. Phillips Field, as many of you know, has been closed for the last few weeks because of a concern about the bridge after the storm. The borough had its engineer assess the bridge, and it's been deemed safe for light traffic. We're working with the borough to allow access with certain restrictions that will be clearly posted while the borough's engineer consults with the bridge manufacturer about any necessary permanent upgrades that may be necessary. And so for the time being, we ask everyone to abide by the restrictions, of course, and to be patient. And I also want to thank the borough for, particularly Jim D'Amato, for his assistance with this. The other challenge we continue to encounter is with bus transportation. We're constantly assessing potential solutions, and Mr. Pepe will give a detailed transportation update after my remarks, but I want to make sure our families, especially our Bayberry families, because they are the ones who have been most affected by some of the challenges, know that we understand their frustration with the busing situation and that we appreciate their patience and their feedback, which we are delivering directly to the bus company. Given the national crisis involving bus transportation, school bus transportation in particular, I'm thankful we have bus drivers to conduct our routes. I've heard horror stories about districts across the state and the country not being able to provide full transportation because they don't have enough drivers. Last, I want to make a few remarks about the potential referendum, if that's okay at this point. Tonight, the resolution is on the agenda, as Mr. Buccarelli said. It's authorizing submission of a bond proposal question to the school district voters at a special school district election in December. By way of background, since being appointed by the board in October 2019, we have focused on two major priorities: finding ways to improve student learning and achievement, and strengthening the financial condition of the district. Now, despite the pandemic, we've made progress in both areas, and we have very high expectations for improving the educational opportunities for our students. As clearly articulated in our district vision that I've conveyed many times before during presentations, and also our district goals, which I've reviewed with everyone recently, we are committed to a culture of inquiry, collaboration, and equity. We believe in supporting innovative instruction, design thinking, and problem solving across the curriculum. We believe in the importance of enhancing social emotional learning and promoting a growth mindset for our students. And we believe in the benefits of a culturally vibrant, inclusive community. In our district, we inspire students to explore, inquire, and collaborate, to solve problems creatively and to find joy in discovery. We have worked long and hard on designing improved educational spaces, which will facilitate the kinds of learning experiences that promote 21st century learning and prepare our students for an increasingly complex global community. A learning commons, a renovated visual arts room, and enhanced outdoor learning spaces are wonderful ways to facilitate learning that leads to more critical and creative thinking and higher student achievement. But they're only helpful if the mechanical operations and infrastructure are safe and up to date. We must have a physically safe, fully functional environment for learning because our students learn best when they are engaged, physically and emotionally secure, and excited to be in school. I know firsthand what it was like a year ago when we were faced with solving the technology infrastructure failure without budgeted funds in the middle of a pandemic to solve the problem. I don't want to experience that with future mechanical or building envelope issues. No one does. And though I'm not a financial expert, and I'll leave the details to the board's bond counsel, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of taking advantage of the debt service aid offered by the state. We had several referendum at the high school while I was principal there. We were able to save a significant amount of local taxpayer money by securing state funds. So I was naturally thrilled that nearly all of our projects qualified for state funding. This means that we would be able to complete the projects for roughly 2/3 of the total cost. And that's a serious discount. And if we don't take advantage of this final financial contribution from the state, certainly another district in New Jersey will. So in short, this potential referendum and its timing, in my view, are critically important to the future of the school district. Working closely with the Operations Finance Committee and the board's architects, we've invested significant time and energy in researching, designing, scaling back, and ultimately proposing a reasonable, financially responsible plan for ensuring the continued safe operation and maintenance of our buildings and creating new learning opportunities through enhancements to these learning spaces so that our students can learn and grow in schools we can all be proud of. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Pepe for the transportation update. No one has worked harder trying to improve the bus issues this year, and I want to publicly recognize his efforts.
Good evening. I want you to see my face while I'm speaking. And this is because you need to know that this is important to me. I can imagine being a parent. I am a parent. I have 3 children, all in schools. And I understand the frustration when you don't know what's going on and there's something that's not working correctly and you don't understand why. I'm doing the best that I can to communicate that with you, and that's why I'm speaking tonight. I'm trying to send messages to keep you updated, but you need to know that this is important to us as an administrative team, and we recognize that it has been I think there's no other word than unacceptable start to the school year as far as our transportation goes. As Mr. Alexis said, mostly for our Bayberry families. So what's happened so far, you need to understand a few things in background. One is that transportation is very heavily regulated as far as what options we have on the table for fixing the issues from the beginning. There are some limitations that are put on there by purchasing regulations from the state, from the national crisis that Mr. Alexis alluded to. In that sense, we're actually, believe it or not, we're actually rather fortunate that in Watchung, all of our buses have drivers, because many communities near us and around the state and around the country, that's not the case. So that's one thing that I'm happy about, is that we do have a driver for every bus. Now, how well they're doing with the routes, that's something that we're continuing to work on. Probably the hardest thing to fix is the timing of the routes. I want the public, the community to know what I've been doing to try and address that, and that we have a light at the end of this very long tunnel. I have looked at the things that I do have power to impact, and that is the route itself, as in the directions where the bus goes, the order of the stops. By changing the order of certain stops, I'm able to make it a more efficient drive for the buses. I did this by actually driving the routes myself and finding areas in town where you can go in a different direction and do the stops in a different order and actually save the bus driving time. Another option that we have on the table and that we're taking advantage of is consolidating stops. What that means is that in some cases, a bus that is consistently late and has stops multiple houses very close together, where we can bring those children to one spot in the middle, we can save driving time that way. And the last, well, there's really 2 more things that we have. The other thing that we have the power of is actually changing routes. And this I've spent a lot of time on, looking at where the routes are going. There are certain routes that start on the south end of town and end up all the way up in basically into Berkeley Heights. And it just doesn't make sense. And so I've rerouted it, and I've had to take a few stops off of some buses and put them on others. None of this has been implemented yet. We're working with the bus company so that we can implement these changes as soon as possible. So those are the 3 things that we have control over. And I've spent the last week going over it over and over and over again. And as I said, even driving around town, looking at the stops, looking at where there's safe consolidations and other places where I considered consolidations, I decided not to, because I wasn't comfortable with the safety of where the children would have to walk. So I've done all of this. The other thing that we've done is we've been talking with the high school because we have tiered routes. And if you're not familiar with transportation, the way a tiered route works is the bus will do its route for the high school, drop those kids off in the morning, leave there, and then start picking up children to bring to Valley View. Once it drops those children off at Valley View, it then starts driving to pick up children at Bayberry. And so some of the routes are starting their Valley View routes late because they're getting out of the high school late. Not significantly late, but late enough that it makes an impact. And so I'm working with the high school on trying to design it in such a way that their buses, as they leave the high school, are going to, the buses that leave earlier from the high school are going to go to the places that are farther away so they can get there on time. So these are the things that we've been working on. I have a plan in place. I delivered it yesterday to the transportation company. I've had conversations with them about it. They're reviewing it and they're going to be giving it to their drivers. I was hoping to have this in place by the end of this week, but they've requested that we wait until next week so they have some more time to make sure their drivers are comfortable with the changes. So we're looking at early next week implementing the new routes. This will be communicated via our messaging system. Basically, a simple message will go out that says, please check your bus stops in Genesis, because once we update them in the system, it will automatically push out to the portal in Genesis. At that time, we will take another look at this and see, and hopefully the changes that I'm putting into place will make this so our buses are arriving on time, so children are getting to school on time, and so children are getting home at a reasonable hour in the afternoon. And I think that's everything I had to share with you. I want you to know, as I stated earlier, this is being taken very seriously. We're very frustrated. I would say as frustrated as you, but I'm sure that's not the case. As parents, this is just unbelievable. And we're taking it seriously. We're really trying to do everything we can. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Pepe. Okay, we'll turn it over to, I'm not sure if Mr. Toda is, let me just see, she's not on yet, so we'll go to Mrs. Kidd for a Valley View update.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the new school year. Our new staff orientation was held on August 24th and 25th. Our new additions are Elizabeth Cornell, Anna Nestor, Victoria Esposito, Ashley Walgren, and Morgan Levenberg. We are excited to welcome them all to our Valley View family. Our teachers returned to school on Monday the 31st for the first of our in-service days. On the first day of professional development, our staff enjoyed a cafe breakfast generously provided by our PTO. What a great way to start the year. Our Valley View students were invited to grade level orientations to acclimate or reacclimate them to Valley View. Mrs. McLeod, Mr. Mell, our peer leaders, and I led question and answer sessions and building tours. Thank you to all of our student volunteers for your assistance. You guys are the experts after all. Our Valley View students began the 21-22 school year on Wednesday the 1st. The entire staff was absolutely thrilled to welcome our students in person to the start of the new school year. The opening weeks of school were packed with lessons focusing on students' social emotional health, team building and communication activities, safety protocols, and of course, those class expectations and safety guidelines. Our students' voices and laughter are true music to our ears. We had our fifth graders chime in about what they're excited about so far this year, and an abbreviated list is they're excited to try to be more independent. The game design lab, which is the STEM course that they're in right now, our clubs and intramural sports, having great teachers, using lockers, having exciting snack options at lunch, meeting new people, not having to walk in lines everywhere, and using paper and other cool materials. One student summed up their experience so far by stating, "At Valley View, you can really be yourself and have fun. I love that I am here living the middle school life." So I think that's a good thing. Life Touch visited our school for Picture Day on September 1st. Oh no, they didn't. That was just this week. Students and staff had their photographs taken throughout the day. At Valley View, we believe that the end of the academic day is only halftime, so we were excited to hold our first club fair on September 14th. During student lunches, students were able to learn more about each of our club offerings from our club advisors and past club members. The list of clubs includes coding and robotics, student council, community outreach, photography, world cultures, yearbook, art, math, intramurals, and the environmental club. And we have a few more clubs that'll be starting later in the year. Please visit our school website for more information. There's a link to our club website there. It'll have start dates, advisor names, and other information. Our iReady Fall Diagnostic Assessment began on Monday, September the 20th. The math diagnostic was given during math and science classes, and the reading diagnostic was given during language arts classes. Any students who needed more time are completing the assessment during subsequent classes or during that 5th period flex time. And finally, lunchtime excitement is back at Valley View. Thank you to our amazing PTO volunteers for organizing the lunches and snacks for our students. It was definitely missed. I hope everyone has a great evening, and we're off to a great start. Very strange start, but a great start. It's great to have everyone back.
Thanks, Principal Kidd. Great to hear about the students and their perspectives on their new adventure. We'll go to Mrs. Fickner.
Hello, good evening. So students and staff are excited to be back at school full time, just as Mrs. Kidd said. It's really nice to see the students' enthusiasm for learning and excitement for lunch and recess with their grade level friends. The PTO lunch program started this week and has been a huge success. We thank the volunteers for their hard work and the vendors for the delicious food. Just to recap some events from the summer, I know it seems so long ago, but we did have a successful summer program for students entering grade 1 through 4 at Bayberry during the month of July. Students had the opportunity to work closely with their teacher to reinforce skills in reading and math while also having fun with hands-on activities. Over the summer, teachers worked on updating our curriculum in social studies, Spanish, health, and music to align with the revised New Jersey student learning standards. Grade level teams will continue this work during the school year by selecting new resources and revising unit and lesson plans. You may have noticed our beautiful new rain garden by the upper parking lot at Bayberry. This was a special project completed over the summer with funding made possible by Rutgers Cooperative Extension and a federal grant. If you have a chance, stop by and read the sign that explains how the garden not only adds beauty to the area, but also reduces pollutants in the nearby streams. And I think it's been getting a lot of business lately with the rain. Our new staff orientation was held on August 24th and 25th. I want to extend a warm welcome to our new Bayberry staff, Ms. Ann Mileno, kindergarten teacher, Ms. Alessandra Lemming, 3rd grade teacher, and Mrs. Joseph, special education teacher, and our librarian. We are so excited to have our library classes back in place. Our first staff in service was held on August 30th, followed by our Meet the Teacher event on August 31st. We were so glad to have the opportunity for this in-person event where students could find their classrooms, meet their teacher before their first day. Thank you to the representatives of WEF and CPAG and the PTO who met with families throughout the day to share all the ways they support our students, staff, and the community. Just a couple of things looking ahead, our fall Life Touch pictures are coming up next week. Preschool, kindergarten, and 1st grade will have their pictures taken on Thursday, September 30th. 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade pictures will be on Friday, October 1st. And those order forms were sent home earlier this week. And lastly, tomorrow we are celebrating Duchenne awareness and honoring our 4th grade student, Jalen Javeri, by wearing red and participating in a 0.1K walk. That's a 0.1, quite short, but we also started our Dollars for Duchenne fundraising campaign this week, and it runs until September 30th. So if you would like to send in $5 or any amount to help end Duchenne, please feel free to send it in or drop it off at the main office. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Principal Fickner. I'm going to keep moving. That Ms. Totota's not on yet. She typically leaves after care at like 6:30, and I know she had a terrible time trying to get home on September 1st with the rain and weather, and I imagine she's having trouble getting home at this point. So I'm going to move to the next section, the Student Safety Data System Reporting, which is our semi-annual report. We're fortunate, as I've said in the past, that we have very few incidents to report. This reporting cycle, we have 2 unconfirmed HIB incidents and 1 violence incident, but it's a violence incident because it fits in the category, but it was not anything close to being violent, but it's just the nature of the reporting system. Last are the enrollment reports. As of September 1, we had 616 students. Now that's 4 fewer than we had at the end of June, but I think it's relevant here to note that last year's 8th grade class was our largest class in the district. So it actually seems that we probably gained more students in other grade levels. And that'll do it for this section of the agenda. Thank you very much for your patience and your time.
Thank you, George. We'll move on to committee reports. Kevin, can you please give the Human Resources Committee report?
Yes, thanks, Dory. Good evening, everybody. We met on Tuesday, and currently on the agenda is a personnel, a resolution to appoint supervisor of building and grounds. That was discussed by the committee. We also are accepting a resignation with regret this evening as well for Barbara Janicki, who is a Bayberry education paraprofessional. We discussed that the administration was having difficulty finding a permanent replacement nurse at Bayberry as well, but they're continuing to work on that, and they're going to explore all of their options. The last thing we discussed were district aides. That's all the updates that I have. Thanks, Dory.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Rich, can you please give us the Operations/Finance Committee report? You're on mute, Rich.
That's when I'm at my best. We had 2 meetings, Wednesday, September 1st. Most of the discussion was on the potential referendum, the tax impact, which, you know, after some comments last week, I looked back and we had our first tax impact conversations in July of 2020. The committee asked bond counsel to review the process for communicating with the public regarding referendum projects. And the committee then reviewed the tax impact document provided by Phoenix Advisors, which I will go over with the board and the public tonight. And that was pretty much it for that meeting because it took up a lot of time. And now I'm trying to find, okay, on Wednesday, September 15th, we continued with the next steps with a potential referendum. We again reviewed the tax impact documents provided by Phoenix Advisors. The committee reviewed draft presentations provided by DRG and decided that they really need work with respect to public presentations. So I think, Rich, we should amend these minutes to say that we are going to, you know, require or request that DRG have, you know, adequate marketing resources and depth for the next phase of this should it be passed tonight. We had an update on the storm damage. Mr. Pepe reviewed the update of the status on the remediation of the damage in the Valley View main office. And we had the work done that would prevent future water intrusions. We got an update on school grounds beautification from Mr. Walker. We got a transportation update, which Mr. Pepe went into in detail a few minutes ago. And we discussed the process for filling the board vacancy, which we plan to do on our October 14th board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Adam, can you give the curriculum committee report?
So let's see, we met on Tuesday the 14th, went over a number of things. Mr. Alexis is going to meet with the regional superintendents to discuss a survey regarding religious holidays, and he'll share that with the committee before it gets sent out to the families. Back to school night, as we've heard and should have received emails by now, that it's going to be virtual like last year. Disappointing, yes, but it's the safest decision at this time. The testing schedule, which also was sent out and as Mrs. Kidd mentioned, has already started. Just discussed that. The Start Strong assessments are shorter versions of the NJSLA and will be administered this fall. The NJSLA will return in the spring. The iReady test will be administered 3 times this year. We talked about the gifted and talented process. We discussed the program quite a bit. Principals are working with the SOAR teachers to determine whether changes to the screening process should be implemented with additional or different data going forward. The principals are also focused on articulating the program vertically throughout the grade levels at both schools. And we as a committee asked them just to assess the existing program and come up with a vision really for it and make, recommend any changes that they would like to see. We discussed diversity, equity, and inclusion texts that would support curriculum. Mrs. Fickner is going to be applying for a grant through WEF to help purchase culturally relevant inclusive texts. The staff will also have input on texts that they'd like to see, again, to support the curriculum, not necessarily be part of the curriculum. It'd be supplemental, I should say, and possibly also be included in the library or the media center. Mrs. Kidd mentioned that she was having GLSEN come in and talk to the staff about ways to include LGBTQ in the curriculum. Special ed and 504 updates. Mrs. Dakota reported that there was a follow-up on the state request for more information about the delays in IEP evaluations. We did have a couple based on the pandemic, but we are all caught up at this point. And yeah, that's really it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Adam. Joe, can you please give us a policy committee update?
Sure. It was the last policy meeting was held on Monday, the 20th. Was a rather light agenda. Most of what we covered is on the agenda tonight, which is the second reading of mandatory policies and regulations from the state that was presented during last committee meeting and last board meeting town hall agendas. The only new item, which is for tonight's meeting, is the school employee vaccination policy. This is in relation to the state mandates for the road forward involving COVID. So that's interrelated with that, which is on for a second reading as mentioned. And that was mandated by the state and the governor. So that's part and parcel of the the road forward approach post-COVID. That's it.
Thank you, Joe. We're going to move on to board liaison reports. Rich, is there anything as the legislative liaison?
No updates.
Okay, that was fast. Adam and Amber, is there anything for community engagement?
Amber, you're on mute. Do you want to go first?
You can report since you wrote the minutes for that.
Well, I attended the police open house. That was a great event. The kids had a lot of fun. getting their mug shots taken. So that was interesting, but no, it was really nice. Everyone was pleasant and welcoming, and it was really nice to see the police force try to build community relations. The 9/11 memorial was great. I thought Anthony's speech was probably the best of the day and was absolutely the most moving. On Saturday, there's the Green Fair at the Warren Municipal Fields from 10 to 1. And yeah, that's about it.
Okay, Kevin, is there anything as the Somerset County Educational Services Commission liaison?
I do not have an update. The next meeting is October 7th, so I'll have something for the next meeting. Thanks.
Jessica, is there anything under the Somerset County School Boards Association?
Oh, no update.
And then Amber, anything under New Jersey School Boards Association?
No update. The next meeting is on the 1st, October 1st.
Okay. We'll move to community engagement. Mrs. Ruperto Ferrara, is there any update from the PTO?
Good evening, anyone. Thank you, Dory. Currently, the PTO is working on various events, which include food sales, spirit wear, food truck Fridays, the fall fundraiser where parents will get information coming out soon. The Bayberry yearbook is out for sale. We have the school store going, Amazon Smiles. Our next meeting will take place on Tuesday, October 19th. We're always looking for volunteers, especially for Valley View. So if you're interested in either chairing a particular event or just volunteering, feel free to visit our website, watchungpto.com, and sign up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Kokiata, is there a update from WEF, or is there anyone on from WEF to give an update? I don't see any hands raised. Ms. Newsome, is there any update from the CPAG, or is there anyone on from the CPAG for an update? Right, and then Mrs. Williams or Mrs. Sims, is there any update from the Watchung idea? Okay. And then we're going to go to the comments from the public on agenda items. So we welcome input from the public. There are 2 times during the meeting when the public is invited to speak. The first opportunity to comment on agenda items only is now. The second opportunity for public comment is towards the end of the meeting. Total time allotted for public comment is 30 minutes. Before you make your comment, please state your name and address. In the event it appears the public comment portion of the meeting may exceed 30 minutes, the presiding officer may limit each statement made by a participant to 3 minutes duration. Comments submitted to the board secretary prior to the meeting will be read first. Our public forums are not structured as a question and answer session, but rather are offered as opportunities to share your input with the board. In instances where the board feels a response is needed, the presiding officer or superintendent will address the comment. New Jersey statutes do not permit the board to discuss personnel or hiring in public session. Names of students should not be used. Mr. Pepe, will you read the statement due to the recording of this meeting?
Members of the public should consider their comments in light of legal rights of those affected and identified in their comments, and be aware that they are personally, legally responsible with potential liability for comments that they make to the board. The board shall not be held liable for comments made by members of the public. And Mrs. Harvey, we do have one public comment that I will read.
Great, thank you.
We have 2 public comments, but one was from a member who I see in the audience. So if he doesn't speak, if he's not speaking after the rest of the comments, I'll read his. as well. Okay, to the Watchung Board of Ed. I have a comment on the agenda item authorizing submission of a bond proposal. As a longtime resident and parent of 3 Watchung K-12 graduates, I follow many municipal issues, including the state of our schools. I remember the last Watchung school bond referendum. We were one of the top school districts in the area, and we were running out of space for the many new students whose families chose Watchung for its affordability and high quality schools. A huge bond referendum was approved by the community to construct brand new additions to both schools. I also remember the relief when that debt was finally retired at the end of 2016, because it offset so many other tax increases that were a mounting concern. Many of us are still very concerned that taxes across the board continue to rise. The Watchung Hills sending and receiving districts are discussing participation in a free regionalization study that would analyze opportunities to save taxpayers' money with some degree of shared services between the school districts. It has been made clear it does not have to be a full regionalization. I was disappointed to learn that Watchung's K-8 school district is the only district who is not engaged in these discussions. Why is Watchung not interested in at least considering the regionalization study? Couldn't some of the shared services or tax savings generated from regionalization efforts fund any of the projects included in the bond referendum? Why can't Watchung use any of its existing capital reserve to fund any of these projects instead of funding the entire amount through increased property taxes? It seems very out of touch for this administration and board to push this bond question through without exploring any tax saving alternatives. Maureen Hemsworth, 75 Cedar Road.
Okay, thank you. I think Sonia Woods was the next person.
Yes, good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good evening. I'm Sonia Woods of Johnston Drive. Many of you already know me. I've been in the school system for over 6 years now. I have a daughter at Valley View and a son at Bayberry. I've always tried to support the schools as much as possible, as much as humanly possible, from being on the executive board of the PTO to volunteering for other school-related events and activities. I also supported several of the current board members, as we all seem to have the same vision at the time. We wanted our schools to be that excellence on the hills that everyone kept talking about. That's why I supported you during the last election and why I voted for you. I want our schools to succeed. Anyway, as you are all aware, we had a boom in the home sales in Watchung over the past few months. If you look at Realtor.com, we had 44 homes sold in Watchung from June 1st through September 8th. So given the number of new families that recently moved to our town, and I think it's safe to assume that a number of them have children enrolled in our district now, I was really surprised to see, as Mr. Alexis pointed out, that there was a decrease in the enrollment. And I understand that the 8th grade class from last year was large, but I'm also aware of several families that have decided to take their kids out of the district and move them into a more robust educational environment. So in reviewing your enrollment charts, I feel that you're missing some key information that would serve as critical benchmarks that I think should be reviewed periodically. So I'm asking that going forward, you please include a column on your enrollment report showing the students that are new to the district, a column showing the students that moved out of district and town, and a column showing the students that moved out of district but are still living in the town. Because when looking at your current enrollment reports, I find that these 3 critical benchmarks are getting lost in the information. And I think that the board needs to address the fact that Watchung families that are still living in the town are pulling their kids out of our school district. Some of the questions that I have in regard to this are exit interviews performed for the families that are pulling their kids out of our school district? Does this administration have a good understanding of why people who live in this town are pulling their kids out of our school district? And what happened to the climate surveys that a lot of you currently sitting on the board demanded from the previous board? I mean, I was one of them. We wanted climate surveys. If you see a mass exit of families leaving our school, why are climate surveys not being circulated to the remaining parents to see how we feel? Here's what I'm trying to say. You're losing a lot of high performing students, a lot of them from families that have grown up at this town and that have lived here for decades. You're losing these students to private schools. Why are we losing them? You're losing them because students performing at grade level or above grade level have been ignored by this board. The needs of the children performing above grade level are not being met academically right now. These children are forgotten. The current classroom dynamic is not suitable for them. If this keeps happening, we can't count on this school system to ever go back to the excellent standards that this town had 15 years ago. So the main point that I want to make is that it's not excellence on the hill right now. And the decline in the enrollment is revealing this. The priorities of this board are really not what I expected when I elected you. You're not focusing on the general ed students, much less the advanced students who you need in this district. While you're focusing on investing millions of dollars on new infrastructures, I think you're losing sight of investing money on the academic needs of the our children's educational needs. I'm sorry. You're losing sight of investing money on the academic needs of the students performing at grade level and above grade level. So I'm asking you to please analyze your decline in enrollment and obtain an understanding of all of our children's educational needs before it's too late. I will continue to strive for our schools to get back to that excellence on the hills that everyone keeps speaking about so proudly. I'm confident that if you analyze some of these key indicators, you ask for parent input, and you implement change, this can definitely be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonia. Rich, I think Dennis Bakos was next. Okay, I didn't know if you were waiting for me or.
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes, Dennis.
Great, hi, Dennis Bakos, 47 Brook Drive. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for all the hard work on the referendum that you're doing. In light of Mr. Buccarelli's comments earlier, I'll hold off on some of my referendum-related questions until later on. I had 4 of them, as the board already knows. But on a different subject related to the agenda, matter of fact, related to every agenda, relates to the population attending the meetings. As a virtual subscriber to this meeting, I can only see the board members and the administration. I can't see anyone in the community as if I was in a real meeting in person. And nor do I see anything in the minutes which represents how many people are in attendance. And so just a suggestion based on that observation that maybe we can have a little bit more transparency around the level of community engagement into the meetings, because it's very difficult to ascertain how many people are actually attending this meeting. I only know those who speak up, for example, tonight already. But other than that, it could be 6 people, it could be 60 people. I really don't know. So I would just make that suggestion as long as we're going to continue having virtual meetings, which I know we've had for quite some time. So I'll save my other comments for the end in case there's an opportunity the board will be able to answer some of my questions before I am able to read them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis.
Madam President, I only meant my comments for the board members. I didn't mean to, to stop any public comments, which I would gladly like to hear and then probably address during mine. So forgive me, Mr. Bakos, for not stating that more clearly.
Mr. Bakos, if you could raise your hand again if you would like to ask the questions now. or if you do decide to wait until the end of the meeting. Okay, he is. Mr. Rich, can you unmute him again?
Sure. Okay. No problem at all. I'll go ahead and ask the questions then now. All of my questions are in reference to the referendum that's on the agenda for tonight. One of them relates to the potential voter turnout, because should the resolution pass tonight, the election would be scheduled to fall on the 14th of December, which is right in the middle of a typically very busy month, and sandwiched between religious holidays. So I think my personal opinion is there's a higher risk of a lower voter turnout. And so I think perhaps I would suggest to the community, I know that we received it at our house, mail-in ballot applications through the Office of the County Clerk of Somerset County. It might be useful if people are worried about their ability to attend, to vote and cast their vote for whatever they're going to do, to send in their mail applications, which are, by the way, due on October the 26th. And I think that could help bolster some of the voter turnout, which I'm worried would be a paltry turnout on December the 14th. My next comment is related to the debt service aid, and which is referenced in the agenda item C4 number 8, second to last sentence, but there could be other references as well. I think it would be useful to better understand how and when the district would receive the qualified reimbursable funds, and how or if those, well, how really, not if, those reimbursable funds would flow back to the taxpayers. I believe that it's 32%, I think my email was incorrect, but 32 or 33% of the 96% that qualifies for the project reimbursements on the nearly $15 million on the agenda tonight. And so the real estimated cost is closer to $10.4 million after that subsidy. I think the difference would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $4.6 million, which would be reimbursable. And will the board be able to share some insights and considerations that the voters can think about in terms of those eligible reimbursements and how that flows back? My third question relates to the final project list. And as far as I'm aware, the architect presentations from February and March of this year are the only available publicly available itemizations of the ideas, which would be included in the referendum. I know in more recent board meetings, there were discussions about what kind of recommendations that are being made at the Valley View School outdoors, but generally speaking, I'm pretty sure a lot has changed since the first quarter of this year when those presentations were posted. So I'm kind of wondering if there's going to be some sort of itemization, of the Bayberry Valley View project, so that the voters will be able to see what the final vision has evolved into after all these months of edits and discussions. And then my final question, which Mr. Buccarelli already kind of referred to, just kind of underscoring my interest in this subject, as I'm sure it's interesting to other people too, the question about the tax implications. And I think that an answer might be forthcoming in October or November. I'm not exactly sure. We'll learn more tonight, but many community members might liken the tax implication answer to how we do the estimates every year on the annual board budget, where near the end of that budget presentation every year presented to the public, there's an estimated tax implication to the community provided based on the average homeowner valuation. The most recent one was, of course, this year on May 6th in the board meeting then. And I'm just wondering, if something like that going to be provided to the community to help educate voters as we consider what's going to happen after tonight's vote for the referendum. So some of those answers may be provided tonight, which I, of course, would appreciate, but I wanted to put that out there as some concerns, suggestions, and ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis. I think the next person was Anthony Ingracia.
Good evening. Anthony Ingracia, 40 High Oaks Drive, with a comment on the referendum agenda item. I also appreciate the kind words directed towards my family from the board, and I hope that you won't find my comments and concerns unkind. I attended Bayberry and Valley View schools from kindergarten through 8th grade before graduating from Watchung Hills High School. I've been in Bayberry many times in recent years when my kids were students there, and I'm familiar with many of Valley View's current facilities from many visits there as well. I'm approaching 30 years of experience in the building construction industry with a focus on public educational facilities and institutional construction. I've led teams as a general contractor building new school facilities from the ground up, as well as additions and renovations to many New Jersey school buildings from K through 12 to higher education. I'm disappointed that the board is voting on this project scope and $15 million amount tonight, when so little detail has been provided to the community. I've reviewed the architect's conceptual presentations posted on the website, and it looks like the majority of the long-range facilities survey was pasted into a referendum package. There are no new building additions in the $15 million amount. I saw a few examples of reconfiguring within existing rooms at each school. And what's surprising is that the referendum will raise taxes for the next 20 years to fund a lot of minor upgrades and routine maintenance, like cleaning stained masonry and replacing cracked sidewalks. Doing it this way makes it so that financing and project consultant soft costs and prevailing wage requirements cancel out or possibly exceed the debt service aid contributions from the state. Buildings obviously do need to be maintained and updated. Watchung should have school facilities that operate safely and efficiently, but it can be done in stages, and it can be done more affordably if properly planned. I don't see that level of planning in here. Even the highest performing private schools with abundant funding have some dated bathrooms and prefabricated sheds for equipment storage because they allocate their resources over time in a prudent way. And where's the community engagement? For Adam Kraft to make statements like he did in the last meeting to the effect that the board alone should dictate what this town needs is not right. There are design and construction experts in this community, school administrators, residents with a diverse range of valuable skills and experiences that could have greatly benefited this process if they had been given the opportunity before the vote being taken tonight. Do their opinions matter to you, or do you alone on the operations committee have all the answers and the only input you need from the citizens of this town is 15 million, yes or no? I believe that the children, parents, and taxpayers of Watchung deserve more, far more information, and far more than what has been to date zero opportunity for input, feedback, and consultation on such a high dollar request from this Board of Education and Administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. I think next is Tracy Zakoff.
Hi, this is Tracy DiFrancesco or Tracy Zakoff. I'm known two different ways. I have 4 kids, all boys. 2 have been through Valley View. 1 has been in private school, and my 4th is new at Valley View. I actually didn't plan on speaking tonight, but it's just a thought, something I was a little surprised with. So having had 2 that are now juniors and seniors at the high school, I guess a few things have changed since my sons were in Valley View. And I guess I'm a little surprised that 5th grade math seems to be everybody doing the same math. Now, it's just 5th grade math. However, I now have to hire someone to help my kid go a little faster. I just wish there was some way to take kids that maybe excel in math and push them a little bit further. I just feel it's not being competitive. And it's just, these are my thoughts. It's my personal belief, and, you know, kind of goes with what Sonia, I guess, was saying. So just food for thought, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. We have Bruce Ruck up next.
Hi, Bruce Ruck, 13 Lakeview Avenue. I would just like to reiterate what I said at the last meeting and what I kind of heard said tonight. I don't know how board members can vote on something without knowing what it is going to personally cost them in tax revenue. I do my budgeting for a year in advance. And I know that if my taxes are going to go up next year because of this $1,200 a year, I may have to go ahead and cut something out, or maybe get another part-time job. Maybe you guys are lucky enough on the board not to have to do that, but I really think the homeowners of this town have a right before you vote to all of us to know what the tax implications are. I think you have a much higher risk of failure if you do not let us, if you're going to vote on something without knowing the tax implications. I don't know, maybe some of you have budgets and you're not going to be able to afford the $1,200, $1,500, or $2,000 extra a year. I don't know anybody's financial status. It's none of my business. But you really need to think of the residents as well as yourselves. Because if you don't know what it's going to cost you, how can you vote on it? You may pick and choose things and say, maybe this really isn't necessary based upon $2,000 a year extra in taxes, or maybe we can add 3 more things if it's only going to be $400 a year in taxes. I don't know. I have no clue. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. See, I don't see any other hands raised. Okay, we're going to move to the action items. Adam, can you please move administrative items?
Yes, I can. I'd like to move administrative items as soon as I scroll up. A1, approve minutes of previous meeting. A2, superintendent designee. A3, accept school security drill report. And A4, approve Watchung Borough School District annual nursing plan.
Is there a second?
Second,
Jen.
Any discussion?
I just had a question on the security drill report. One of the shelter in place drills was 30 minutes. Is that normal? Was there a reason for that? Just, it was a lot longer than all the other ones.
That might have been one that we had to enact as an action.
I thought it might be, but it was on the
earlier in the year. Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Barbella,
Yes.
Mr. Beccarelli,
yes.
Mrs. Ingracia,
Yes.
Mr. Kraft,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mrs. Murad,
Yes.
Mrs. Scharf,
Yes.
and Mrs. Harvey.
Yes.
Motion's passed.
Okay, Kevin, can you please move personnel items?
Yes. I would move personnel items. B1, appoint supervisor of building and grounds. B2, appoint Valley View co-curricular revised. B3, appoint Bayberry co-curricular. B4, appoint before and after care staff revised. B5, accept resignation.
Is there a second?
Second, Rich Buccarelli.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Barbella,
Yes.
Mr. Beccarelli,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingracia,
Yes.
Mr. Kraft,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mrs. Murad,
Yes.
Mrs. Scharf,
Yes.
Mrs. Harvey.
Yes.
Motion's passed.
Okay, Rich, can you please move operation items?
Sure. I move C1, approved payment of bills. C2, approved transfer of funds. C3, accept financial reports. C4, authorize submission of bond proposal. And C5, I'm looking for 5 here. Authorize the application, submission, and acceptance of allocation for American Rescue Plan, the ESSER grant. And C6, authorize the application and submission of the IDEA grant. C7, award contract for professional services with Phoenix Advisors. C8, approve service providers. C9, approve joint transportation agreement with Morris County Jointure Commission. And C10, approve professional travel and related expenses.
Can we get a second?
Second, Joe.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to summarize what we're doing at the bond referendum tonight, which I know is important, and all of the questions and points valid. I would like to address them. So the district passed its last referendum nearly 20 years ago in 2002. It was in the amount of $24 million. The net amount that the taxpayers of Watchung paid after state aid was approximately $19 million. The proposed referendum is for $14,978,000, so let's call it 15 million. 96% of which is eligible for state aid at approximately a 33% rate. So the net to the town is approximately $10.2 million, which is just a little more than half of what it was 20 years ago. So, you know, I've heard these comments, and we have, I think, worked really hard over the past couple of years, starting with the long range facility plan, had multiple meetings with the members of the board, detailing the projects, having discussions about the projects in the referendum, all in front of the public. And Mr. Pepe, would you flash up the summary of those projects so we can have a quick view of them without each item, line item, which we've done in the past, and we will obviously be available to the public. And just on the process, you know, we've had bond counsel engaged in this since the very beginning. And the recommendation from bond counsel was the board actually does a long range facilities plan, recommends itself, which is what tonight is about, what the referendum should include and what the amount should be. And then after, if that is approved, go to the public and educate them on every single aspect of it to the extent they haven't followed the meetings or to the extent there's more information that's required. And we intend to do that on a schedule that will culminate with an election. A referendum vote. Now, the referendum vote is the public's say on whether they think this is a valid use of funds of taxpayer money. And it's our job to educate them in this respect. So just to summarize, the overall cost, let's call it 15 million, and we're going to round numbers here, but almost half of it, $6.4 million is for HVAC upgrades, heating systems, cooling systems, exhaust systems, air purification, and controllers. You know, we have a situation now where the HVAC system is aged. They've been breaking down, especially in the era of COVID. I don't think anybody wants their children to be going to school, with 20-year-old HVAC systems that are not providing, the best environment. $4.6 million is for building interior, which is, and this is for both schools. The $15 million is divided roughly half and half between Bayberry and Valley View schools. And we have details on that, and Mr. Pepe will post this tomorrow on the school website, district website. So the building interior is $4.6 million. It goes for things like ADA upgrades, which were badly needed, media center upgrades, casework, the art room reconfiguration to enhance the educational experience, and then, miscellaneous interior repairs and upgrades to which haven't been done for decades. We got 1.3 million roughly for security systems. We have 684,000 for the building envelope, the roof replacement and maintenance, and exterior door maintenance and upgrades. Electrical systems and technology is about $623 million. Site improvements are about $1.3 million, including the Valley View field renovations, the outdoor learning commons that Mr. Alexis referenced, and the storage sheds. And so that comes out to the $14,978,000. Thank you, Rich, for flashing that up. So I want to talk about the dynamics of a referendum and the use of referendums in schools. The 2002 referendum was paid off in 2017. Rich, you can drop that. That's over 4 years ago. And it wasn't, as usually happens, replaced by another referendum because that was a long time. This had the illusion of saving taxpayers money. I've heard several people reference, yeah, our taxes went down, and we saved money. Well, it is an illusion because I guess the board at that time liked the optics of, lowering taxes, but the reality is exactly the opposite. Not renewing a referendum actually costs the taxpayers more money and is not fiscally responsible. And all of this at the expense of potentially hindering the education and endangering, the health and safety and security of our children. Let me explain what I mean by that. Capital assets such as HVAC, which for people not in the business is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. It's the thing we breathe, right? Electrical, plumbing, technology, roofs, and other infrastructure items have a certain useful life. And after that useful life is done, things start failing and breaking down. And that's exactly what happened over the last 4 years. Over the last 4 years, we replaced 3 rooftop units that broke. We replaced critical communications equipment that failed. We did extensive roof repairs. We did required security upgrades. And as Mr. Alexis mentioned, we had a huge technology failure. We also had boiler repairs we had to do. All of these expenses over the last 4 years totaled well over $1 million. We haven't done exact forensic analysis on what would have been eligible for state aid, but I think that the number is pretty close to $1.5 million. But because we didn't do a referendum, the result of that is that instead of paying only 2/3 of that cost and having the state pay for 1/3 of it, the cost of all those items was borne 100% by the taxpayers of Watchung. These costs could have saved, if we had done a referendum and replaced it when we should have, could have saved Watchung $300,000 to $500,000 or more, because the state would have borne part of the burden of that, right? And so all this goes to the theme of fiscal and physical sustainability. In this respect, I think it's also relevant to note that our referendum request would have been over $3 million higher, in the $18 million plus range, were it not for the generosity of a family in our community who provided the funding to build both the Bayberry Playground and the Valley View STEM Lab, both of which were sorely needed by the schools. So as far as physical sustainability and physical infrastructure sustainability, we don't have that ourselves. We can't depend on private contributions to run our schools. Fiscally, we need to be self-sufficient, and that goes for infrastructure too. Many of you probably don't realize the serious drainage issues we had at the Bayberry Playground. And I was on the operations committee, so we approved the drawings for this very generous donation. But of note was that over $1 million of the expense for that playground is underneath the ground. It's underground drainage system that allows that park to exist in its state. Now, imagine what 9 inches of rain from Hurricane Ida would have done to that field, that playground, and possibly even the school had the new drainage system not been in place. That playground was functional the day after the hurricane. Finally, now let's get to the 2 main issues that people have been asking about. What does this mean for our taxes? And why don't we use capital reserve funds to pay for the improvements? I would hope, first of all, that the community would trust us to not put forth a referendum if we didn't understand these items. We were advised by bond counsel last year not to talk about anything until everything is set in stone and you actually have very clear facts that you can put numbers to. We are at that point now, after the last meeting in which we approved the last bit of it, which was the Valley View field. So first, capital reserve. Our capital reserve fund is currently less than $823,000, which is approximately 6% of our budget. This is much lower, both in absolute terms and as a percentage of total budget, than our surrounding districts, which range from a low of 9.4% to a high of 23% based on the most recent publicly available data. Mr. Pepe did a good job of surveying the surrounding municipalities and municipalities of similar size. You just have to look at Warren. Warren has a $9.2 million capital reserve, which is over 21% of their budget. And why don't we have a high capital reserve? Well, we don't have a high capital reserve because we never did another referendum, and we're paying for all these things that are failing out of our own pockets. 100% of the cost of this is going to the taxpayers of this town, instead of a more responsible 66% availing ourselves of the taxes we pay to the state that we're not getting back. So we should be building up our capital reserves, not depleting it. The 3 RTUs were very expensive. Finally, the tax impact. Again, we were considering this back last year. The tax burden for the tax burden on the last referendum, let's start with that, the 2002 referendum. The average value of a home in Watchung is $730,500. From the 2002 referendum, the tax burden on a homeowner of an average value home of $730,000, the taxes for that referendum were over $800. The tax burden for the proposed referendum would be less than $300. The two factors are much less principal and a much lower interest rates than before. So if we would have done this 4 years ago, like we should have, taxes would still have gone down over $500 a house. And we wouldn't have paid the full cost of all the capital improvements that we have suffered in the interim 4 years when we ran out, when the referendum went out and the equipment started failing. So, you know, we in the operations committee have tried to do a very, very honest job of keeping people informed, working with our fellow board members, going through detail, and only putting down in the referendum the things that were absolutely necessary to keep our schools running and to keep, you know, our educational standards high. I've heard a lot of comments from the public today about people leaving, you know, the school system. And I guess, you know, I agree, we should look at that data. And if it's true, we should ask ourselves why. And I would suspect the why is we don't invest in our schools. And we're spending money to fix things, and we're spending it unwisely because we're not using 33% of the state taxes that we can use to supplement our spending. And so we're having to take away from other programs. And so we're having to have learning environments that are not modern. So in closing, I just think that this referendum is very necessary. I don't think there's a nickel of waste in this referendum. And, you know, I've run real estate companies before also, right? I scrutinize budgets of hundreds of millions of dollars. And I don't think there's a nickel worth of waste in this budget. But, you know, we've had that debate, and we will be very transparent with the public about, you know, what all of those details are, to the extent that that hasn't been clear in last meetings when we do our educational process. So in summary, last referendum, over $800 per house. This referendum, less than $300 per house. In the interim, we spent well over $1 million, 100% of our own money, fixing things that broke that we should have had a referendum for earlier. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rich. I think you could not have said it better. I appreciate you speaking for the committee, for the board.
Okay, if there's no other discussion.
Oh, excuse me. There was a question that I don't think I'm quite qualified to ask, that we have our bond counsel, Tony, on. Mr. Bakos asked a question about debt service aid and qualified reimbursable funds and when they would be available. Tony, could you address that, please?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Tony Solomini from Alentz, Goldman and Spitzer. What happens with debt service aid, it's not a quote unquote reimbursable expense. What'll happen is, as the question sets forth, is you're doing a $14.9 million project. You're going to issue $14.9 million worth of bonds. And then each year, a portion of that debt service will come from the state of New Jersey in the form of debt service aid. So when you do your annual budget, Mr. Pepe will just ask your local municipality for the net amount minus the amount coming from the state aid. So it's on a yearly basis. as part of the state's budget. They'll give you a certain percentage, depending on the eligible cost of your project, towards the principal and interest on a year-to-year basis.
Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome.
I do have comments. That was a lot of information, and I think it's important to clarify that throughout this process, I know all board members have supported the concept of a referendum to maintain our facilities, myself included. I support the projects as part of our long-range facilities plan. I voted for them without hesitation. We need well-maintained school facilities, especially the HVAC and electrical systems that have exceeded their useful life. And before any of us were on this board, the former board members at least acknowledged that much, which is why, as Rich has explained, some of those HVAC and RTU upgrades and roof repairs were paid for before our time and were planned to be paid for again. Now, I understand the concept of debt service aid, and that the easy way to explain it is that a third of the costs are paid for by the state. But you do have, as we see on even tonight's agenda, with the approval of yet another consultant, and then for the first time in this board's packet and tonight in this meeting, we're hearing that we're going to hire a marketing consultant. Again, these are layers of consultants that add to escalation and soft costs that add a third of the project right back on, and in some cases exceed. And to your point, building back the capital reserve, that's how districts build back their capital reserve sometimes, is there's so much money added into this referendum project list. So with all due respect and appreciation for the efforts of the Administration and Operations Committee to put this together, I can't support including so many extra smaller projects in one large bond package without proper planning to have the capital reserve to pay some of it, even a cent of it, and instead raising residents' taxes for 20 years to pay the entire amount. Now, we have different financial, philosophies of keeping constituents perpetually in debt, that when one large, very, very large debt service is retired, you replace it with a similar or lower amount, as you said. And I think people who were living here at the time all say that that time in Watchung's history was a boom. It was 99th percentile schools bursting at the seams. Valley View School did not even have a gymnasium, a middle school with no gymnasium. How are you going to do sports? This was a very large referendum, and everyone agreed it was very needed, and it was major construction projects. I believe the exact same square footage or more was added to both buildings, more than doubling the size of each schools. We have 608 in-district students right now. That's the lowest enrollment in 20 years, while our population is up over 600,000 or 6,000. That's, we have 10% of our population in our schools. That's not a lot. So it's important to remember that our community elects us as school board members to represent their interests too. We don't just serve the interests of 600 students. We should always work to balance the needs and wants that the district has for its students with the burden we're asking the larger community to bear. This is why I advocated for a more consultative approach with the community regarding the project scope and the tax impact in advance of finalizing the package. It's why I asked to separate out the critical infrastructure projects that I know we have unanimous approval on, or agreement on, I should say, from the other projects, the nice to have projects, allowing constituents to vote for the most urgent needs first, as a first priority. That was not the will of this board. So yes, an extra $300 a year in school taxes may sound insignificant compared to the retired debt that retired, I think, at the end of 2016, but maybe showed up on people's statements later in 2017. That amount, is what people will pay in addition, right, to the $5,000 a year that the average house already pays for K-8 schools, which already, without a referendum, already increases by another couple hundred extra a year because of, if the district takes, as it should, and have advocated and voted that we should, the full 2% levy cap. So these are not the same taxes that we were paying as a school district 20 years ago. Watchung homeowners pay additional taxes to the regional high school. Municipal taxes have gone up and will continue to go up if we bond for a new library. Somerset County taxes have skyrocketed. So we are experiencing a lot of tax increases. So I understand the constant comparison to, we had a referendum before, we should have it again. And to some extent, I agree. But for example, I wish we could do what neighboring school districts have done when allocating public funds for their critical infrastructure. You know, Mr. Alexis at the beginning of this meeting mentioned participating in the Watchung Hills High School referendums, I think in 2016 and 2019. I mean, I'm shocked to hear such a comparison being made, because those were very small amounts compared to their massive budget, $3-4 million projects at no additional cost to taxpayers in both cases, because they used their existing capital reserves. So they got the benefit of the debt service aid, a third off, but they paid for it with their reserves. Warren Township is contemplating the same thing right now in the same timeframe that we are for the same critical infrastructure, HVAC and security. But just like Watchung Hills, it's a very small amount of their overall budget, and they get the third reduction from debt service aid, and they pay the remaining amount using existing taxpayer dollars, no new debt. So it's not a fair comparison. And I think that is what people have seen in the past 20 years. Maybe it's the attitudes have changed towards massive infrastructure projects, especially when they don't build anything new. And so I know our capital reserves don't allow us to fund this list at all, as you said, and I know your numbers are correct. We have 6% of our budget in capital reserve, not 9, not 20. But bonding for an amount greater than our entire annual operating budget, which is extremely rare for anything other than the construction of a new school, is out of step with the expectations of our local communities. It's not what our neighbors are doing. It's not what's succeeding on special ballots. So, you know, Mr. Alexis said everything was needed when the project list was over 18 million. We've been told in recent meetings, last meeting, and I hear people are saying around town, everything is needed to keep schools open. And just tonight, I think you said there's not a penny of waste in it, or not a nickel's worth of waste. I really think, I consider this untruthful at this point. I mean, you showed costs that I jotted down, $812,000 for new casework, cabinetry and lockers. Maybe it's needed. I voted for it as a part of the long range facility plan, but don't tell people it's needed to keep the doors open. It's not. $815,000 to reconfigure the Valley View Media Center. This is not a construction project. This is a lot of new furniture and carpeting, reconfiguring some areas. $500,000, $525,000 to do the same in an art room. It's nearly $1 million to repurpose outdoor space at Valley View, turning the parking lot and softball field into a courtyard and basketball court. And it's, as far as what we saw on our spreadsheets, almost $300,000 for a new storage shed. There's $120,000 for acoustical wall treatments, replacing older ones. It's not that they don't exist, we're just upgrading them in 2 music rooms. $120,000 also to do Valley View's teacher lounge, redecorating. This is a project that, and you talk about the generosity of benefactors, and I completely agree. But those projects can be done far more efficiently than the red tape bureaucracy that goes along with bonding and retaining 5 different consultants as counsel. A parent offered years ago, a small amount of years ago, while my kids were in Bayberry, to do these projects in the teachers' lounges as a community service at no cost, get the stuff donated, have people, designers volunteer their time. It was denied at the time by the administration at that time. No one is still here, but this is the kind of community involvement that you may see come forward after these discussions. $237,000 to replace broken ceiling tiles and repaint grids. This is stuff a well-run school district can do as routine planned maintenance with their own existing buildings and ground staff, and it's a far lower cost. Talk about a third, it's probably half. So I could go on, you know, as far as a nickel's worth of waste, I have found several of these to be, if not wasteful, then at least not hugely beneficial to do as part of a massive package. And I want to remind you, I voted, as we all did, for all of these projects to be included in the long-range facilities plan with no hesitation at all. But I can't support asking taxpayers to bear the burden of paying for all of them in an all or nothing $15 million bond in December.
I just want to correct something for the record. I did not request that we hire a marketing firm. That's actually against the law in New Jersey. I requested that we investigate DRG's ability to do an effective marketing campaign. Thank you.
The word hire was used in the minutes from the operations committee. So maybe they would hire it.
And that's why I asked Mr. Pepe in my remarks to change that.
Are they hiring the consultant and passing the costs along to us?
That should be a function of an engineering firm, and we're not going to hire 5 consultants. We hired, and you make it sound like we had, you know, we're just having a lot of consultants all over the place. We have an attorney, we have bond counsel, and we have an architect and engineering firm. And you need all 3 of those to do a referendum.
You do. And tonight we're hiring the Phoenix advisors for the municipal bond, which you need. You need them we're selling the bonds. No one's here is going to do that.
That's the attorney and bond counsel 1, the bond financial advisor 2, and the architect and engineering firm 3.
Okay. And the market.
And they're all required for a referendum. So I don't think that it's, you know.
Understood. But just to be corrected on 5 when, you know, it's clearly about 5. I mean, whether marketing is separate or put into DRG category, whether bond counsel and attorney are the same.
They're the same person. They're the same person. They're one.
But we've used our own district board attorney as well to consult on this. My point is there are a lot of.
I don't think we have actually.
Referendum.
I don't think we have actually used our board counsel for that. Thank you.
So I'd like to make a comment regarding this. So I'm on the operating committee. We spent months on this. I understand, certainly, believe me, we're fiscal hawks on the committee. We look at the money, we look at the budgets, we look at what's being done. As Jessica mentioned, we started over $18 million, right? If we were not responsible, we could have just taken the assumptions provided us to that time. We brought it to under $15 million through input and through review and through eliminating things that we felt may not have been in the public's best interest. I've heard a lot, and I have 2 kids in the school systems. I've heard a lot about excellence on the Hill. Well, you don't have excellence without some level of investment, okay? Nothing's for free, okay? If we want to do Band-Aids, then more people will leave the community school system, right? If you can't, if you look at the budget now that we just went over, roughly $6.5 million are for basic things, for HVAC. That's not to improve mathematics. That's for air, okay? Over $1 million for security. Security, right? Who's going to argue against that? We don't want security for the school systems? These are basic things. So a large portion of this budget is for the basics. And as mentioned by Mr. Pepe in terms of the survey, we're woefully below in percentage terms our savings fund to be able to fund this basic maintenance. Other school systems like Warren has mentioned is over 20%, right? So if we're not going to make an investment, right, on the basics, how do people expect there to be excellence on the Hill? Nothing is for free. It costs some amount of money, right? Now, as mentioned by Rich, and I think it's lost on people, if we want to do Band-Aids and you want to budget ad nauseum for 20 years, guess what happens? Due to COVID, interest rates are extraordinarily low. That's why everyone's refinancing their mortgage. It's not normal to have a 30-year mortgage at less than 3%, right? If you want to delay, no problem. You'll pay more for it later. It's obvious. Interest rates are near zero. How much lower do you want it to go, right? That's a cost that we will all have to bear in the future if you want to delay. And then 5 years from now, with the same or different board members, there'll be a discussion as to why things are so expensive. Well, you know why? Because interest rates go up when the economy gets better. We're not going to be in this low interest rate COVID environment forever, right? The Fed has spoken this week. They've already projected interest rates to start rising in 2022. That's wasted money. That's interest, right? I think anyone understands that has a mortgage. So I don't believe this budget to be excessive, and we can't go to the public in drips and drabs every 2 years to ask for another $2 million to do a renovation, or seal tilings falling down, or not having HVAC, or windows that are broken, or dirty carpeting. So that's why we go for the budget the way we're doing it now, right? Because you go to the well once, you ask for the money you need within reason, right? You give the kids a good environment, and they want to learn, and you want to make it excellence. And that's the whole point of this, right? So I don't believe it's excessive. If you look at the numbers, right, a lot of it are basics. If we're never going to get through this hurdle, then forget about excellence. These are Band-Aids then. Then you'll be budgeting out forever with higher interest rates and higher costs, and you'll be kicking the can down the road like everyone else does. So the only thing we're doing tonight is saying, based upon these estimates, which in good faith have been reviewed ad nauseum, put it to the public for review and approval. It doesn't get passed. It just means that we're putting it out for the public. If you want to delay, no problem. You'll pay more for it later with interest rates. And you get nothing for that. You know that, right? You get nothing. So I think in time, we've gone through the details tonight. There'll be more information provided by the committee and the board to answer the public's questions. I think we've done a fair job. We've shown the itemization tonight. And then the public can vote on it. If you do not wish to vote yes, then you vote no. That's of course not what we want, because we want to make the investment. And as mentioned, because of interest rates, last time around, 20 years ago, it was over $800 per family. Now we're talking about 300 or less, right? I'm not saying that that's inconsequential in terms of everyone's budgets. What I am saying is that we should strike while the iron is hot and interest rates are low, to make the investment now, get a third of the funding from the state, or you delay and you suffer the consequences and you'll never have excellence. And that's my 2 cents.
I have a comment. I've worked in banking for I have experience more than 12 years, and I've seen interest rates fluctuate. I think in 2019, just when, was it Hillsborough, I believe, that were going out to bond, they gave a conservative number of 3% of an interest rate. So you're right, they fluctuate, it can go up, and that is something that everyone should bear in mind. However, when I became a board member, it was to equally serve everyone, whether it be the students, the parents, or the taxpayers. And throughout the year, we've had our differing opinions, but we all share a goal is excellence on the Hill. And I'm grateful to the operations committee on their hard work on this project, but I can't vote for this to place the referendum on the ballot today. And the reason is because I feel like we still need an open discussion with the residents of its financial impact of this project on them. And
I've said this multiple times to make it public. I've always been told that, oh, the bond council feels that it's not the right time. And then it wasn't until the last time when a resident brought it up, that is when the committee, shared the implications with the rest of the board. I think now is the time for a public forum and a presentation prior to defining the scope, which I believe has been finalized, right, of the project, since it impacts students, parents, and residents. It's a 20-year commitment, and it should not be made without full transparency and a dialogue with residents. I love the long-range facilities plan because I think the children will love it, but we still need full transparency. I haven't seen or heard in this whole plan, I've heard that, 20 years ago they bonded for it, then 4 years ago the debt service was completed, everything was paid off, and now we're bonding 4 years later for another 20 years. But what I'd like to hear from the operations committee and is not only letting the residents know what the implications are, but I would also like the operations committee to say, hey, look, we're going to build our capital reserve in the next 20 years. This is the life of the upgrades that we're putting in. We're not putting a Band-Aid on the problem. We are fixing it right now, and then we're moving forward. And in 20 years, we'll be able to have that capital reserve to make those investments or upgrades, and then also be able to get some debt service aid should we bond, and then fulfill it with capital reserve. So I without informed taxpayer input, I feel that we are not getting the best results for the students, parents, or taxpayers. And yes, there are emergent needs, and that is why it's important to have that and inform the residents of what our plans are. And thank you.
Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Can I please just add a quick question about something that is not referendum related that we're approving here? And it's simple probably for Rich Pepe, unless Rich Buccarelli knows this. The ESSER grant, may I, through the chair?
Sure.
Okay. I'm sorry, I apologize in advance. I feel like we've all asked these questions about the CARES Act, the ESSER grant, but I've been reading a lot in the news. It's been on TV. Presumably there are 3 stages of federal grants for schools. I'd love to put this into context. Is this the only money Watchung District is getting? I had heard previously that Watchung was getting $200,000 in one of the rounds. This is for less than that. I also heard that 20% of these COVID-related federal grants or federal aid dispersed to schools must be earmarked specifically for educational programs that address COVID learning loss. Is that at all related? Just explain this ESSER grant and how it fits into the larger context of federal aid related to COVID.
Sorry, would you like me to respond to that?
Yes, please.
Okay. So yes, there are 3 rounds of, we'll call them the CARES type money. The first round was the CARES Act. We received about $30,000, $28,000 for that. The second round was the CRRSA, C-R-R-S-A, or C-R-S-S-A. That was also referred to as ESSER. And so that is the one you were referring to that had the 20% allocation for learning acceleration. So for the second round, we received a total of about 180,000. A percentage, 25,000 was dedicated to learning loss or to learning acceleration. Actually, they were very clear. They did not want us using the phrase loss. Learning acceleration. And 45,000 of that was dedicated to mental health supports. Those we voted on as a board last year, and we are implementing those programs now. We're starting to implement them now. The one that's on the agenda for tonight is the ARP ESSER funds. which is the third round. And it's a little confusing the way that the state put these out. That 165,000 is only a portion of the district's full allocation. However, it's the only portion we have access to right now. There's another portion that we'll gain access to at some point in the future. They haven't been clear about that. And I don't recall the exact dollar amount of that, but it's not another 160. It's like, you know, a smaller amount. There's also, I guess you could call it part B of 3. They included another round of funds called ARP IDEA, which basically mirrors the same types of uses that our regular IDEA funds can be used for. And I think, is that one on here as well? Yes. So for that, we're getting $28,000 total, $25,600 in basic and $2,100 in preschool. So that's going to be used for out-of-district tuition to defray the costs and free up some of that money and for some supplies. And for right now, those are all of the CARES related funds that we have.
Thank you.
Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Barbella?
Yes.
Mr. Buccarelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingracia?
It's going to be a no on C4 and yes on all other operations items.
Thank you. Mr. Kraft?
Yep.
Oops. Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mrs. Murad?
No on C4 and yes on all the other items.
Mrs. Scharf?
Yes.
Mrs. Harvey?
Yes.
Okay, motion's all passed.
Okay, hold on 1 second. I just have to scroll down a bit. Okay, there's nothing under curriculum. Joe, can you please move policy items?
Sure, just 1 second. Policy, move E1, approve policies for second reading and adoption, and E2, approve policy for first reading.
Is there a second?
Second, it's Rich Buccarelli.
Discussion?
Hi, I apologize. I am on the policy committee and I wasn't able to make this meeting, but it's just a quick, it's not really even a question made, but in case this came up in the policy meeting as you were discussing the first read for the vaccination policy, I've read it, I'm aware it aligns with the executive order and it's basically required and mandatory for us. It's just that I wondered if there had been any discussion during the policy meeting in setting this or preparing to set it for our faculty and staff. Was there any mention of the consistency in policy, even though we don't need a policy for visitors or volunteers to the school? I just personally have the philosophy that different rules for different people, especially in organizations, is never good. It creates dissent or division. And I guess I have been told that PTO volunteers who may be in the school as infrequently as once a month will now be banned from the school unless they show proof of vaccination and they're not offered the same option that we offer our faculty and staff, which is, I think, that governor's executive order stipulated mandatory weekly, at minimum weekly testing, which can either be PCR or antigen test, which of course the school will take care of, at least if not administering, then facilitating, I guess you could say, for the faculty and staff. Obviously you wouldn't want to do that for anyone outside of faculty and staff, but was there any discussion for why there's no consistency with the PTO volunteers?
correct.
Yeah, we have briefly discussed that in the past, and we made a determination that it was the safest approach to make sure that our visitors are all fully vaccinated. We're not alone in that, and all the regional districts are taking the same approach. We didn't discuss whether it's once a month. We were with the PTO. We understand that the volunteers are coming in on a regular basis to help with the lunch sales. So that's why we decided to do that and to extend more protection here in this situation.
Okay, well, if I could just add, my 2 cents as someone who ran several food sales teams during my kids' time at Bayberry, and knowing what it entails to be a lunch volunteer. You have minimal contact with students. You don't really even hand them their food. In most cases, you're in the back, that kitchen area of the APR. And, to have faculty and staff who choose to be unvaccinated, but submit to the weekly tests, they're in with kids daily, whereas the volunteers, are certainly spending far, far less time. And I just think there's a bit of inconsistency there to have a stricter policy for parents of children than our teaching staff who's around them every day for hours at a time.
Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Barbella?
Yes.
Mr. Beccarelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingracia?
Yes.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mrs. Murad?
Yes.
Mrs. Scharf?
Yes.
And Mrs. Harvey?
Yes.
Okay, motion's passed.
Okay, is there any other board business to discuss? We're going to move on to comments from the public. Please remember to, and this is on any item, please remember to state your name and address before commenting. I think we have Bruce Ruck's hand raised.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to thank Mr. Beccarelli for going against bond counsel and telling us what our approximate tax implications would be for that bond. I appreciate that very much. And my other question is, and I don't know if you're willing to answer it, who is paying for testing of faculty and staff that are not vaccinated? Because many of the insurance companies are now starting to deny paying for, I'm sorry, not paying for vaccination testing. I apologize. Many of the insurance companies are now denying coverage for testing unless you are actually sick. So is that something that the state is going to be paying for? Is that something that the district is going to have to be paying for? Because I understand that many of the major places that do testing are now charging $80 to $150 per test unless you're actually sick. I don't know if anybody's willing to answer that.
Thank you, Bruce.
Madam President, may I make a quick comment?
Sure.
I apologize if I misstated what bond counsel's position is. I was certainly never told not to talk about this, but to talk about it at the proper time. And the proper time was when we had all of the information with respect to all the costs, and we only got the last piece of that with respect to the Valley View Field. And then at that point in time, when we knew what the prevailing interest rates are and our financial advisor could do the calculations, that was the time that the bond counsel advised that we should make that information public so we could be as accurate as possible. So I apologize if I gave that impression, and it was certainly not our bond counsel's advice, never to reveal that information, but only to do it when we knew exactly as close as we can what that amount would be.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it, because the way I understood it at the last meeting, it wouldn't be known until after the board voted tonight, but I appreciate you letting us know very much. Thank you.
Okay, I think the next hand was Anthony and Gracia.
Whoops, sorry. I think Anthony, I hit the button at the same time, right as he tried to unmute himself. I clicked and I muted him again. I apologize. Anthony, can you?
No problem. Thank you. Anthony Gracia, 40 High Oaks Drive. And while I could understand that there might have been advice given regarding dollar amounts, I find it very hard to believe that bond counsel would advise not to engage with the public at all on scope and total dollar amount before voting on this referendum. I'd also like to thank Joe Barbella for having a refreshing comment that being forthright and significantly walking back the previous statements that were made by fellow operations committee members regarding at the last meeting, a large number that was to keep the doors open. And I believe I heard earlier that only absolutely necessary items made up the entire amount. So I appreciate that being walked back with Joe's comments. But Mike, I wanted to add that I agree with a previous comment at the beginning of the meeting about the regionalization study. And I have read some on it in the newspaper and watched the webinar on the subject. And I just want to ask that, didn't we aspire to collaborate with the high school? When the board hired Mr. Alexis, people said he's never been a superintendent, but his experience as the high school principal at Watchung Hills will be a huge benefit. Aligning our middle school to the regional high school will give our students better outcomes. Instead, Watchung is the only town in the sending district to reject multiple invitations to participate in exploring ways to share services and collaborate with the other members of the sending district. That seems unbelievable to me. Every other district has engaged to talk about working together to improve the education of our children and to find efficiencies in working together, except us, with George as our superintendent. It's a complete embarrassment for the whole town. It costs nothing to explore and is completely non-binding. To continually refuse to participate is just a total embarrassment to our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. I believe the next person is Michelle Guzman.
Actually, I'm using my wife's phone. My name is John Guzman. I'm at Glen Road. My question was for the referendum. Like all construction projects, you hit snags and there are issues that you can't plan for. Do they have a contingency plan for the extra money, or was it already built into the budget now? Like, what happens if there's issues down the road? Where does that money come from? I'm done.
Okay, thank you, John.
There is a contingency built into the budget. Thank you.
I think the next person, it just says Megdari. I apologize if I'm saying your name wrong.
Yes, hello. Yeah, it's just my last name. This is Miriam Megdari on Ridge Road. I just wanted to offer a clarification for, I don't recall which board member said about volunteers at the schools requiring vaccination. I don't want to take a side on whether or not we should require vaccination, but I did want to clarify that the volunteers do in fact get very up close and personal with the students, and we do hand out food directly to students at both schools. So I just wanted to clarify that as someone who has volunteered this week, that happens. That's all.
Thank you, Mariam. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Motion. So moved.
Second,
Second, Jen.
any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you for joining us this evening. This meeting is adjourned.